Northern Iowa's most elegant furniture inventory. McIntyre's is open 7 days a week until sold out. McIntyre's is going out of business.
This is WHO TV 13 Des Moines.
Six-term Congressman Richard Gephardt of Missouri. Tomorrow, he becomes the first Democrat formally to announce his candidacy for the 1988 Democratic presidential nomination. He's our guest today on Meet the Press, Sunday, February 22nd, 1987. Hello and welcome once again. I'm Marvin Kalb. The 1988 presidential campaign is now underway, the most important political pursuit in a democracy. In both parties, one candidate after another is getting ready to throw his hat into the ring. Just the other day, one decided not to, New York Governor Mario Cuomo. Another, Georgia Senator Sam Nunn, has put his decision on hold. As for our guest, the Congressman Gephardt, he describes himself as a dark horse candidate. According to a recent national poll, Gephardt now attracts 1% of the Democratic vote. So for those of you who may not know very much about Richard Gephardt, we prepare this biographical sketch. Richard Gephardt, all-American boy. Gephardt grew up in St. Louis, the son of a milkman and a legal secretary. As a young St. Louis lawyer, Gephardt worked his way up through local politics to a seat in the House of Representatives and a leadership post in 1984.
He's got the tremendous amount of ability, he's got the respect of the members of the House, and he makes a beautiful appearance.
The 46-year-old Gephardt has been called a terminal centrist, a moderate who has concentrated on such timely economic issues as tax reform, deficit reduction, and trade legislation.
I think Dick has all the background necessary to make government work.
One issue that could trip Gephardt up is abortion. Gephardt, a Baptist, opposes abortion and federal funding of abortion. But he recently dropped his support for a constitutional ban on abortion.
I think there's no question that it is a problem for him as he enters the Democratic primary to have to explain this position. It is one that many people will find unacceptable.
Gephardt is considered a hard-working long shot for the Democratic nomination. He's already made 21 trips to Iowa, the site of the first big test next February of the 1988 race. But the latest Iowa poll gives him only 3% of the vote, behind Gary Hart and Jesse Jackson. And joining me now for our interview with Congressman Gephardt are two of my colleagues, columnist Robert Novak of the Chicago Sun-Times Syndicate and NBC's national political correspondent Ken Bode. Congressman, welcome to Meet the Press.
Good to be here.
And let's get the campaign started. The obvious question first. There's a very broad array of Democratic candidates. They'll be coming on board in the next couple of weeks and months. Why do you feel you should be distinguished from them, be the front runner of your party, and possibly the President of the United States?
Because, Marvin, I think I can lead, and I think right now in our history we need strong leadership. We need leadership that not only can put out white papers and ideas and make good speeches about those ideas, but can make the ideas happen. In the House, on tax reform, on trade, on health legislation, on Social Security, I have compiled a record of strong leadership, taking ideas, working them through the legislative process, and actually bringing them into being. And I think that's what we need in the next presidency.
Okay. Mr. Bode?
Congressman, you have a record against abortion, against busing, against gun control, against any further time to ratify ERA. You're for school prayer, for tax credits to parents who have children in parochial schools. Now, admittedly, these are a little older issues in the Democratic orthodoxy, but they have been orthodoxy issues for the Democrats for some time, especially those who vote in primaries. Are you convinced that they're just not going to matter this time?
Well, Ken, I don't think you've correctly stated the record. I am not for changing the law on school prayer. I have not been for changing the law on gun control. So I think some of the...
You're for no further gun control.
That's right. I'm for leaving it the way it is. And I think on some of the issues you've misstated what my position is. But let me make my point. I have strong beliefs about a lot of issues. Strong beliefs about abortion, strong beliefs about all of the issues you've mentioned. I'm willing to talk about those beliefs in this campaign. I will stand behind my beliefs. I think the voters in the Democratic Party and in the country at large will examine those closely and I think they'll be attractive positions to a great majority of the voters.
Representative Gephardt, you've been described as being on the right wing of the candidates who will be contending for the Democratic presidential nomination, but on national security affairs, in 1986, you voted against chemical weapons, you voted against the Strategic Defense Initiative, you voted against the Contras, you voted for nuclear test ban, you voted for defense cuts. Mr. Gephardt, is there a dime's worth of difference between you and the rest of the Democrats on national security questions?
Well, Bob, I'm for strong national security. I'm for having a strong defense. You mentioned a lot of programs, but you didn't mention a lot of things that make up a strong defense. I have been for spending money for the training of personnel. I happen to think the most important thing in defense is strong people.
Can you tell me one vote, sir, that you cast in 1986 that is different from the other people running for president?
I haven't memorized everybody's record, but I surely have voted for weapon systems that I believe are important. I voted for the mobile midget man. In fact, I led the amendment for it. I voted for the Trident submarine and the missiles. I'm for strong systems, but you got to understand that we've got to redefine security in this country. It does not come from buying every weapon system on the shelf. It comes mostly from having strong, trained, educated, motivated people.
Mr. Gephardt, let's pick up on some of those themes when Meet the Press returns right after these messages.
Meet the Press, the world's longest-running television program, is sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, helping America use its abundance to meet the world's needs. And Raytheon Company, where quality starts with fundamentals.
The fundamentals. There's often nothing fun about them. That's why at Raytheon Company we admire people like Debbie Thomas. People who are dedicated to perfecting the fundamentals, practicing them again and again until they're flawless. At Raytheon, we do the same thing. Because in electronics, aviation, appliances, and energy, we believe quality starts with fundamentals.
Many countries have written into their constitution provisions for freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. But if this is true, why is the Constitution of the United States so exceptional? Well, the difference is so small that it almost escapes you, but is so great it tells you the whole story in just 3 words: we the people. In those other constitutions, the government tells the people of those countries what they're allowed to do. In our Constitution, we the people tell the government what it can do, and it can do only those things listed in that document and no others. America is depending on you to reach your highest and be your best, because here in America, we the people are in charge.
We are back on Meet the Press with Congressman Richard Gephardt of Missouri. Tomorrow he formally announces he's a candidate for the presidency. Congressman Gephardt, when Walter Mondale said in 1984 that it was time for the American people to be told something straight, the deficit was dreadful and you had to raise taxes. Do you feel, as you enter this campaign now, that you will be able to level, really, with the American people? And if you felt that taxes had to be increased, that you would say that?
I absolutely would. I think people want straight talk and they want sense, but I think we've got to talk to people about what our vision is for where we want the country to go. What are the challenges we face, and what do we need to do to meet those challenges to make America first again? And that's what I want to talk about. And then you can talk about how we get there and what it's going to take to get there. But unless you describe to people and get people excited and motivated about where we're going and how good it's going to be when we get there, then a discussion about the how-to, about the taxes or the way the budget needs to be constructed, is going to fall on deaf ears.
No, that may well be, but until you get to the vision and its implementation, you've got to have the plan. And I'm asking you, I think, about your plan. Do you feel, on the basis of the deficits that exist now in this country, on the budget, on trade, that the United States will simply have to raise taxes?
In addition to cutting spending, yes. The answer is we've got to balance the budget in the next 3 or 4 years. We're taking in 18.5% of gross national product. We're spending 24.5%. In 1981, Ronald Reagan said we could cut taxes, raise defense. The difference would be made up through economic growth. The supply side experiment has not worked, and therefore we have to address that problem, deal with the deficit. But to do it, you need to tell people why you want to do that and why it's important.
Just to follow that up, sir, do you then support Speaker Wright in saying that the scheduled drop in upper bracket tax rates as a result of the tax reform should be suspended and the rate should be kept at their present level?
I would rather increase the minimum tax to increase a little bit the progressivity of the present tax code. Let me tell you something. In the tax reform we did, we have a more progressive tax code today than we used to have. So we've increased taxes on people at the top, even if you let the top rate come down.
So you oppose Speaker Wright on that?
I do. But if we're going to bring in revenue, there's two sources we ought to look at. One is energy taxes, either a gasoline tax or an oil import fee. And I would like to look at an across-the-board import fee on all products in order to bring in some revenue to help the
Representative Gephardt, the AFL-CIO Council met in Belle Harbor, Florida the other day and came out for an increase in the minimum wage, which some critics think would really cause more unemployment. Will you support the AFL-CIO there?
I would support an increase in the minimum wage. We haven't had one since, I think, 1977 or 78.
Well, let me ask you then a follow-up question, if I can, sir. Can you name anything, any slight thing where you oppose the AFL-CIO? You are supporting their trade bill, which some people think is protectionist. Can you name any place where you and labor are on different sides of the fence?
First, the trade bill's not protectionist, and we'll maybe talk about that in a moment. Second, I voted against a minimum wage increase in 1977, the last time it was up. The reason I voted against it was because it was indexed.
But today, is there any place where you oppose labor?
In my tax bill with Bill Bradley, we had a taxation of fringe benefits, and it was strongly opposed by organized labor. I call issues the way I see them. I don't call issues based on what this group or this person wants. I do it in the interest of what I think the public policy should be.
Congressman,
that's the way I do with any issue that organized labor or anyone else is interested in.
One issue that also has a resonance with Democratic voters is this issue of abortion, on which you seem to have changed your position, if not your mind. You did support a constitutional amendment for a time, said you didn't think the country was ready for it. Have I got that right?
I've not changed my beliefs on abortion. I think that abortion is tragic, and we should try to cut down on the number of abortions.
What would your policy be on abortion as President of the United States?
I'm not in favor of a constitutional amendment. I think we have been locked too long in a fight between whether or not there should be an amendment, whether or not the law should be changed. My belief is that that's kept us from concentrating on practical answers that we can improve in giving people options to abortion or helping people to avoid unwanted pregnancies. And as long as we're locked in this endless debate, which seems to go nowhere, we had a vote in the Senate a few years back on the states' rights amendment.
Do you support the law as it stands right now?
What I'm telling you is that I'm not in favor of a constitutional amendment to change the law. I am in favor of practical answers to help people to avoid abortion.
Can I follow that up? You said in 1984 in a letter to the Missouri Right to Life people, you, quote, "You may be assured of my constant and persistent support for the right to life." That was less than 2.5 years ago. Can you tell me, sir, why would you change so quickly? Is it because you're running for president?
Not at all. My belief is the same. What I said in the letter, I still believe. I think we've got to try to help people avoid abortion. The question is how. We get to the question of mechanics of how to reach the certain belief.
Well, can't we say then, Representative Gephardt, that your position today, not what it was a couple years ago, but today, is precisely what Teddy Kennedy's is, that you're against abortion, but you won't do anything about it?
Well, I'm not sure of what Senator Kennedy's exact position is. I assume he's been for the funding of abortions. I believe we should concentrate federal dollars at helping people avoid abortion, at helping people avoid unwanted pregnancies. And so I think there may be a difference in my position than his. But the point I'm trying to make is that my beliefs haven't changed. I want to try to help people avoid abortion.
But isn't it true that no Democrat who supports a constitutional amendment banning abortion would have a chance for the nomination?
I have no idea whether that's true or not, and I don't base my beliefs on what I think will be politically good here or there. I stand for what I believe. My beliefs on abortion have not changed throughout. I'm supporting mechanics, means that I think will achieve that belief.
I'd like to try to get to this and try to find out exactly what a Gephardt platform on abortion would be? How would it be different than the present Democratic platform on abortion if you were the nominee?
Well, the present platform, I think, comes out for federal funding. My platform would not. As far as a constitutional amendment, I would be, I think, where the platform is today, which is to say, not in favor of a constitutional amendment.
So poor women who needed an abortion could not get one under President Gephardt?
Well, I think that federal monies, and we're talking here about federal monies and federal priorities, should be targeted and specifically driven at trying to help people have options to abortion rather than paying for abortions. Some states, some private agencies provide abortions for women who are not in Medicaid, and those would still be available.
You know, when you change your position on the constitutional amendment on abortion, Representative Gephardt, the Archdiocese of St. Louis said, we feel not only disappointed but betrayed. Do you think that they were not right to feel betrayed on that point?
I don't think they should be. I was very clear about what my position was. I stated it before the last election. The voters of the 3rd District of Missouri who elect me voted for me with 70% of the vote in the last election. There was no hiding what my position was. I was very clear and forthright. I answered the questionnaires to the Missouri Citizens for Life, so they had a full knowledge of what my position was. Again, my beliefs have not changed. We may have a disagreement over how to achieve those beliefs.
Gentlemen, I think it's time for a break now. Meet the Press. We'll be back right after these messages.
Today, the fastest growing octane booster in America is lead-free ethanol. And not just because it's good for cars. Ethanol is boosting the economy too, stimulating new business, creating jobs, and improving the balance of trade by cutting our bill for imported oil. It's also helping to fuel the recovery of American agriculture by providing a huge new market for corn, our most abundant crop. As popular as they've already become, cleaner-burning ethanol blends are expected to continue to grow in the next few years. Not bad for a fuel that's only been around since 1978. But then, with all it has going for it, no wonder ethanol has taken off so fast.
Here's the purchase agreement for your Tandy computers. The training sounds great. Can we get it done in time?
Absolutely. The schedule we've designed for your people includes courses for each department with hands-on training and specialized software instruction.
And we'll be with you every step of the way. That's the kind of support and training we need.
Tandy Computers at Radio Shack Computer Centers. In business, for business.
We are back on Meet the Press with Congressman Richard Gephardt of Missouri, the first Democrat who's going to throw his hat into the ring. Congressman, if you were to become president, the issue of war and peace is obviously a very big one. The issue of nuclear weapons is a very big one. Let me ask you a specific hypothesis. Let us say the Russians have overwhelming conventional superiority in Europe. We have a NATO alliance which says that the United States believes an attack on one is an attack on all. If the Soviet Union, using its conventional strength, should attack Europe, would you as president have it within you to push the button and use nuclear weapons against the Soviet Union to stop that attack?
Yes, but I would also hope that we could change that conventional balance so that my presidency or any presidency wouldn't be confronted with that choice. No one would want to have to push that button, but I would do it if it was the way to repel that attack. Our deficiency in the last 20 years or even 40 years has been the inability to have a sufficient conventional deterrent. We haven't made the commitment to it, and I'm sure the NATO allies haven't made the commitment to it, and I would like, as the president, to be able to urge them and convince them with us to do that.
How in the world can you talk about a conventional deterrent, sir, when you want to cut defense spending below the present budget levels?
Well, a conventional deterrence in Europe is not just dependent on what we spend, it's also dependent upon what the Europeans spend and how well NATO is organized. For a long time, the French haven't even been part of the coordinated effort. So it's not just a matter of money, it's also a matter of the willingness and the will of the countries to come together to provide that kind of deterrence.
But you're saying the West can have, without a nuclear deterrent, enough military deterrent to stop a Soviet attack?
That should be our goal. That should be the kind of a program we should set out on with our European allies. It's something that we can do if we set our mind to do it.
Congressman, this week Mario Cuomo dropped out of the race for president. One of the reasons he said he wouldn't seek the nomination is that it would have such an effect on his family, the amount of time he'd have to spend away from his family. Now, your family's even younger than Mario Cuomo's family. You have a son who's been ill in the past. Is your family with you on this one, and how did you weigh that family factor in this decision?
Well, as you know, I've been out in the country over the last 2 years. I think this last year I'd made about 160 trips into the country trying to see if it was possible to put together a campaign. So we've had some testing of what it's like to run for the office. And last night we had a dinner together, and I pulled out the paper, the statement of candidacy, and we signed it together. I signed it, but they signed it with me, because your family has to be in a partnership with you in this kind of an effort. You cannot do it alone, and everybody in my family, my wife and my 3 youngsters, are with me. They're looking forward to this year of campaigning. Hopefully it'll be 2 years of campaigning, and we have made our bond. We're going to do this.
As we said at the top of the show, Congressman, you've been in Iowa 21 times. You've only got 3% in the Iowa poll. What wasn't said is that the Des Moines Register that did that poll recently ran your picture next to that number, or actually ran a senator from Nebraska's picture next to that number. 21 times already, and you're going to have to go back again and again. Isn't there a better way to do this, Congressman?
Well, Ken, as you know, in those early states, you're looking for supporters to help you find people to come to the caucuses. And it's a very close personal scrutiny that goes on, and I think that is a good way to pick a president. There's got to be some time in this process when human beings who are voters get a chance to look close at the people that want to be president of the United States. And I think the people in Iowa, New Hampshire, and the other early states do that well. They really act as surrogates for the rest of the country. They see us 4 and 5 times up close and personal, and then they make their judgment on who they think should be president. I think that's a good way to do it.
Congressman, another question on foreign policy. Let's assume for a moment that President Reagan is right about Central America, and that if funds for the Contras were cut off, the Sandinista regime might be able to spread its influence throughout the region. Would you be prepared to send American forces to Central America to stop them?
I would, but let's back up and talk about what our policy should be. I think we've had a failed policy for 7 years. And the main reason is I don't know what the goal of our policy is. Is it to get rid of the Sandinistas, or is it to satisfy legitimate American interests in the region, stopping foreign military bases, stopping them from interfering in the affairs of their neighbors? The goal has never been clearly stated. And then we've never had, to my way of thinking, the right way of getting to the goal. First, you use diplomatic measures. You try to reach a treaty, a contract with the Sandinistas and with their neighbors and with us to carry out our legitimate interests. And second, you then use economic measures. If those don't work, then finally you have to use military power. But it's the last thing you do, and I think if you run the policy correctly, you never have to get to that point.
Representative Gephardt, at the beginning of the program, you said that the bill that you sponsor, and it is supported by the AFL-CIO, is not protectionist, as some people say it is. What it does do is open up the machinery for quotas and limitations of imports from countries that run a surplus against us. If that surplus is not reduced by 10% a year, aren't you afraid that you are opening up the possibility of an international trade war?
Not at all. And the thinking that it will is really rooted 40 years ago, in the past. We have been living with the specter of Smoot-Hawley and what went on in the 30s and in the 40s for too long. The world has changed and we have changed. The markets today are not open. The markets to the United States are not open. There's no reciprocity. There's no equal and fair treatment. America has to stand up for the rights of American managers and American workers. And we have to demand that other countries treat us as we treat them. That's what my bill does. It only treats countries that have dealt with us with a pattern of unfair trade practices.
Let's talk about American consumers. Aren't you saying to the American consumer that he is going to have limitations if he wants to buy a Japanese car because he thinks it's a better car?
Bob, do you think American consumers are helped by having foreign markets closed? Do you think ultimately the consumer, the voter, the constituent, the person in this country is helped when foreign countries treat us unfairly? I don't think so. If we're to have economic growth in this society, which I think is the most important goal we have to have, we've got to be on a level playing field. We aren't on one today, and the only way we're going to get it is to stand up for the rights of the country.
Just so the viewers might understand what we're talking about, if your legislation does hold the possibility that the ordinary person could not buy the products he wants to buy, doesn't it?
It'll never happen, because the minute we get tough, the other countries will finally change their behavior. And just look in the last year, we finally got tough with the Japanese on microchips, and they sat down and did a treaty with us. We got tough with the Europeans on agricultural products, and at the last minute, they finally opened their market the way we had asked them to do it. We simply haven't been tough enough. This president stands up to the Soviets. He needs to stand up to the Europeans, the Japanese, and our other trading partners and say, open your markets.
Congressman, a question about your fellow candidate, Democratic candidate Jesse Jackson. Do you consider him to be a serious candidate, and how do you intend to relate to Mr. Jackson?
He is a serious candidate. He's going to get support all over the country, and he will be an addition to the debate that will go on within our party. I intend to treat him as I would treat any other candidate who's running on our side. If I agree with him on an issue, I'll say it. If I don't agree with him, I'll say that as well.
Got an issue or two that you do agree with him on?
I agree with him on the primacy and importance of human capacity and education and training. I think if this country is going to succeed, it will only succeed if our people are strong enough, educated enough, skilled enough. And I think he makes good points on that. And don't what?
Agree with him.
Agree with him.
What he said about Mr. Farrakhan and his policies in the past, I've not agreed with at all, and I think he's wrong on that.
Congressman, I think our time's up. Thank you very, very much for sharing your thoughts with us about what you would do if you were President of the United States. I'm sure in the next couple of months, some of your colleagues will be joining you in the effort, and ultimately, the American people will decide. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
That's it for now. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Finding a phone in a car isn't that unusual anymore, except when it leaves the car, for greener pastures, the high seas, or a leisurely lunch. Radio Shack keeps you in constant communication with their affordable, transportable cellular telephone.
Hello? Oh, yes, he's right here. It's for you.
Yes, I heard about the merger. Buy 100 shares.
The affordable, transportable cellular telephone, only at Radio Shack.
At Raytheon Company, we believe that success comes from mastering the fundamentals. That's why we admire people like Tom Kite, people who are dedicated to perfecting the fundamentals, practicing them day in and day out until they become second nature. So whether it's in electronics, aviation, appliances, or energy, Raytheon works hard on the fundamentals. Because at Raytheon, we believe quality starts with fundamentals.
Meet the Press has been sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, helping America use its abundance to meet the world's needs. For a printed transcript of Meet the Press, send $1 and a stamped self-addressed envelope to Kelly Press, Box 8648, Washington, D.C. 20011.
I'm Brian Dumble. This week on Today, the pros and cons of mandatory testing for AIDS.
I'm Jane Pauley. Also Bob Hope, Harry Hamlin, and Raymond Burr.
Join us this week on Today.
Leaving the fundamentalist church can be traumatic for some.
I tried to kill myself at one point.
How people cope with this sometimes frightening decision. Tomorrow on NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
What do the most sweeping tax changes in history mean to you?
I wish I knew.
Oh, boy. I don't have answers to those questions. At H&R Block, we know you're concerned.
Oh, that's putting it mildly.
So H&R Block has created a brand new service called a tax forecaster. It's a written analysis of how you'd come out under the new tax laws. Available whether Block prepares your return or not.
Then I'll know whether my taxes would go up or down.
The tax forecaster only from H&R Block.
Because you want to know.
Citrus Hill Select's big new 96-ounce jug. It sure got a whole lot to love.
Citrus Hill Select gets expressions from the heart and puts it in a jug, but that's only where we start. It's resealable and shakeable and doesn't make a mess. Your family's gonna love it 'cause it helps the juice stay fresh.